friends, let's talk about executive functioning and cognitive flexibility. You might be wondering why we would spend some time learning about that when we're doing modules on keys to literacy and science of reading. And the answer is that executive functioning is a global skill that impacts all of a child's learning. And of course, that's going to have an impact on their reading. So let's take some time to talk about it and learn about it. I want to be clear first that my intention is not that this is one more thing to test or monitor or plan for or even intervene on. It's simply something that we admittedly know very little about, so let's take some time to learn about it. It might help provide one more explanation for why comprehension is difficult for some of our students. It actually could be a root cause for a lot of kids. If we put them in lots of reading interventions and they're not making growth, it might be something more global that they're struggling with, such as executive functioning. It could provide insight into a potential source of misunderstanding when you're doing text with students, and it could help prepare you to recognize some trouble spots for some of our learners. So let's start by talking about a definition of cognitive flexibility, which is a skill under executive functioning. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to consider multiple bits of information or ideas at one time and then actively switching between them is the key part here. So I think of this kind of like we have Thanksgiving coming up and how I'm preparing Thanksgiving dinner, and in my head I've got when to start the carrots and when the turkey needs to be done and how everything, I need to switch things from the back burner to the front burner and put things in the warmer. All these things I'm juggling in my mind and actively switching between in order to meet my goal of everything being warm and ready at the same time. That requires so much mental planning, and it's kind of exhausting actually. So executive functioning plays a really big role in our day-to-day lives. Our skilled comprehenders, our strong readers, sometimes we don't even know why, but we say, yeah, you're a good reader. You're excellent. It's because they can easily switch and hold multiple goals at the same time. These students are very flexible and they can balance meaning making and decoding and lots of other skills all at once. They have very developed brains that allow them to do this. Some students, however, they are less flexible and they cannot read more than just word decoding. I call them word callers. Chris Tavani, in this book I love, I read it, but I don't get it. She calls them word callers. They are just saying the words on the page. They are not getting deep levels of comprehension. They are not able to focus. They focus on certain aspects of the text to the exclusion of others. They're not thinking about deeper layers of meaning, just those words. Which leads me to something I've always struggled with. What is our definition of reading? I have lots of parents of kids of all ages who tell me, yeah, my kid is a great reader. And I smile and that's great, but I want to know, what do you think reading means? Because for some people, it just means accurately reading the words with emotion and fluency. But for me, reading is also, am I making meaning of the text? So what is a great reader? It's all the above. Cognitive flexibility requires being metacognitive and being aware of your own thinking. Here are many of the things that our students are juggling while they're reading. They're looking at the letters and the letter sounds, and of course we're training them at our level to look at word parts, affixes and roots. We also need them to balance various word meanings, if it's a homonym or something that has a disciplinary specific meaning in different areas. Sentence meanings and how they change based on how we construct them. What is actually your goal of reading? What am I supposed to be doing? What strategies am I going to use that help me make sense? How is this text structured, and does that give me any clues as to what the meaning of the text is? We have to think about pronoun antecedents, which are pretty important in fiction writing. He, she, which she. Which one are we talking about in this paragraph? Challenging timelines or shifting narrators. We've got tense shifts and maybe flashbacks or future perfect, things that haven't happened but could. Some students read that as it happened when we're saying, no, if I were to be king. nonlinear texts, especially online, where to go next, what am I reading, what am I focusing on. These are all things going on behind the scenes while a child is reading and need to be talked about. So how do cognitive flexibility and reading comprehension eclipse each other? Let's talk about that area. The truth is, inflexible thinking will always lead to limited comprehension. Strong comprehenders need to be flexible thinkers. An inability to shift focus to any particular type of feature and integrate the new information they're receiving, whether that's a meaning, sound, syntax, or some other text feature, they have to integrate that. If they're not able to do that, their text interpretation will not be fully processed. At the same time, we also need to be flexible and adjust our reading behaviors to ensure that our reading goals are met. So what this looks like is students recognizing, oh gosh, I need to slow down. Oh, I maybe need to take notes. I should annotate. My favorite, that didn't make sense. Let me go reread that. Let me try a different strategy because this one's not working. Let me ask for help. Let me look up what that word means because maybe it doesn't mean what I think it means. If you have kids that are unwilling to do any of these tasks, they are the kids that are going to get stuck and not able to understand what the text means. So keep in mind that the more demanding or complex a task is, the more flexibility it actually requires from you. And I think about this, what's demanding for me may not be demanding for you. If I was going to read an 18th century poem or like a manual on air conditioners, I will have to be as flexible as possible and pull out all of my tips and tricks and exhaust all of my cognitive flexibility trying to make sense of that. But other people, that might be a breeze for them. So a great visual for understanding cognitive flexibility in a day-to-day example is the game of Uno. You can see cognitive flexibility in action because your players are considering two aspects at the same time, color and number, and they actively have to switch features as required to play the game fully. So readers must consider multiple ideas or input simultaneously and actively switch between them. We know this inherently, but it is not something that we are often taught in our teaching manuals, our models, our textbooks, college. This is newer science. So let's read an excerpt from your favorite Amelia Bedelia and think about how cognitive flexibility skills might apply. The text says, and Amelia Bedelia put the lights out. So those things need to be aired out too, just like pillows and babies. Oh, I do have a lot to learn. This excerpt includes lexical ambiguity, words or phrases, so putting the lights out, that require readers to consider multiple meanings simultaneously. So she's putting them out to air out, but putting out also means turning off. You could argue that this is background knowledge and, teaching kids idioms is essential and that would solve this. Yes, and do your readers have the skills to slow down and go, wait, that didn't make sense. Why didn't that make sense? What should I do about that? Should I just keep plowing through and just keep reading and word calling? Or should I try something else? That's the part that's cognitive flexibility. So yes, we can load them up with all the background knowledge and idioms, but if they're not actively employing cognitive flexibility to think about how that made sense, then they're not being flexible readers and getting the full meaning out of the text. So now let me give you a selection that's going to challenge your adult brain to use some cognitive semantic flexibility. I want you to pay particular attention to the word figure as it appears in this teal text. The board, having just received the annual report, saw the figure was unacceptable. The new manager was quick to figure out that the numbers were being presented in a way that didn't truly figure into the company's long-term growth. She changed the presentation's tone to be more direct, deciding they needed to adjust the marketing figures and re-examine the historical figures to get a clear figure of their overall understanding. Please notice how the definition and the part of speech of figure kept changing as you read. This constant change requires us to inhibit the previous definition that we thought made sense and shift our focus to a new meaning based on the local context, meaning the surrounding words. When we do that, we're demonstrating cognitive semantic flexibility. So look back at our definition of cognitive flexibility. That's where we're considering multiple bits of information at one time, and we are choosing actively what to embrace and what to inhibit. We are juggling these things at the same time. It might feel innate to us because we are skilled readers, but this definitely poses challenges for students. So how is cognitive flexibility measured? Well, one really popular way for researchers is just a simple sorting task. Just like Uno, we would have your students sort into two different categories. Here we have them sorting by color and by shape, just to measure how accurate and how fast they are, because you need both speed and accuracy. Now let's connect that to phonics and reading, and that has a very specific bougie name: Graphophonological Semantic Cognitive Flexibility, GSF for short. It's a very specific flexibility skill that connects or bridges word reading and language comprehension. Again, something that is innate to skilled readers, but needs to be looked at more closely for our striving readers. The good news is that we actually can help kids expand their executive functioning by helping them get faster and more accurate with sorting tasks like this. So in this one, they are given a stack of words: socks, shirt, sweater, sponge, soap, sweeper, boots, bib, belt, bucket, broom, and brush. And they need to sort them simultaneously as clothing and by their initial sound. If you are interested in trying this out and seeing how fast and easy it is for you, I have included a slide that you can click on an example and give it a try yourself. I also included a slide with more examples if this just interests you for any reason. So, both, as I mentioned, where are we going here? So when I read with kids, I notice that they slow down and sometimes they just full on stop reading. And I will always ask them, hey, what was going on in your brain when you were stopping? I noticed that you stopped a few times. And often what we determine is that they were grappling with something that didn't make sense to them. They were pumping the brakes because they needed a tick to sort it out. And I always praise them. That is so wonderful. I love that you're doing that. We want to encourage that because that is them flexing their cognitive flexibility muscles, and that is something that will get better with time. We don't want them to see that as a bad thing because it slows them down and they should just keep reading. We actually want to lean into that. So what I want you to remember is that skilled readers handle multiple features of texts simultaneously for successful comprehension. An inability to shift focus to any particular type of feature and integrate that information is going to prevent full processing. So what do I do with all this information? My goal for teachers is to move from this to this, instead of saying, yeah, he seems to really struggle with comprehension. We're not really sure why. To one reason he might be struggling is, he shows limited flexibility when shifting or balancing multiple somethings, what meanings, choices, perspectives, strategies, outcomes, goals. Let's go over what you may have gained from this module. As a result of this module's learning, you might deepen your understanding of cognitive flexibility and executive function. This might spark cross-curricular conversations with other teachers on this child's learning team if this is something that's impacting them in multiple academic areas, which is likely possible. You might begin to recognize a lack of cognitive flexibility in students when you're working with them during a read aloud or conferring. If they make a mistake, like they miscue lead for lead and they don't self-correct, that's a pretty good sign that they're struggling with flexibility. You might decide to attempt to boost their metacognition. When working in small groups or reading with a student, you might want to teach them to recognize when their current strategy isn't working and try another one. Sometimes that sounds like these coaching phrases. Did that word make sense in this sentence? If not, what else could it be? Or this word, address, address. It can be used as a noun or a verb. Which part of speech does it need to be here? And how does that change the way that you say it? So modeling and thinking aloud with students and sharing your cognitive flexibility with them. I also would love you to consider some more questions that would elicit cognitive flexibility. You might decide to use questions like these to deepen discussion that you're having around a particular text. Just read a couple to you. These are perfect examples that require lots of cognitive flexibility. How would this story be different if it was told by this character? How do you think this character sees this one? And what about the reverse? What if the character hadn't done that action? What would be the different outcome? If we changed the setting, how would our story be impacted? If the explosion didn't happen, how would the book end? What my pondering question to you is, are these questions measuring comprehension? Or are they encouraging flexible thinking? Or yes? Are they essential? Or are these extension questions? We often like to use these as like application questions or a level 4 question. But if a student can't answer this, does it mean they didn't fully comprehend the text? I don't have an answer to that. But to wrap up, cognitive flexibility and executive functioning absolutely impact reading comprehension. And it's a great first professional step for us to understand and recognize it at play with our students who are grappling with text and meaning. Thanks for watching.